Good evening. Happy Friday. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Living Waters, Falling Deeper in Love with God's Word. I am one of your hosts, Lauren Cruz.
And I am Stephanie, your other
Yes,
host.
she
But
is.
yeah, I'm here. I've been sick, but we're going to do it today. So
Yeah, so if Stephanie needs to mute a
Hop off.
microphone or turn off a camera or something, we're just going to let her have a moment. And you're stuck with me for a few minutes. So
if I go dark, you know why.
She sent me a text this week and said, "I'll let you know." And we've done shows by herself before. It's never as fun.
No.
And I felt bad. She sounds terrible. I feel bad for her.
Yeah, it's I'm better than I was, and so I have the yucky stuff, bronchitis. I read there's like 4 different respiratory things going around.
Yuck.
Apparently, I got one of them, and sometimes I just break out in coughing and can't stop. So
it's okay. You take a moment if you need it. It's okay. We are continuing through the book of Luke. I think we're we thought, oh, this will be easy. We'll finish this off in a few weeks. No, we're going to be doing this until the spring. But it's okay. We are doing the book of Luke. So if you have any Bible, really, any version of it is fine. I've been having fun reading so we're both using the Apostolic Writings by Andrew Gabriel Roth. He's translated the New Testament out of Hebrew and Aramaic. And I like to read it with another version because I'll read something. I go, oh, what does that sound like in English? And I'll, go and look at the other translation. And there's just enough difference that it does. To me, it makes a difference. To me, I feel like we have watered down some of the reverence. I think we've watered down some of the seriousness. I think we've misinterpreted just enough that people, I can understand why certain philosophies have developed, because it's just a tiny bit enough that you're like, okay, I understand. But I appreciate reading it in an original language. And so
for some reason, this isn't on your Facebook page.
Okay. I don't know where they came from. I don't know where. We have a comment. We're reading through a comment. We're not real sure where it popped up at, but okay.
Yeah. So we're just trying to get it. So it is on our YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, and of course but excuse me, sorry. Okay. I know a lot of people watch it on her channel because it's not, or her Facebook page because it's not on mine anymore.
And if it's not,
I don't see it on yours, but I guess
when I look at the drop down menu on our StreamYard page, it says I'm live. It says you are live, but I guess
it's not. Lauren Cruz, author, speaker. It says it still has January 10th.
Really?
Oh, from last Friday, and I've refreshed the page multiple times, but it doesn't show up.
Disappointing. Okay. Yeah. Now you got me wanting to go check it out and look.
Sorry, I'm doing it for you. But it is. I did put it on my website from my YouTube channel, so.
It is saying that I'm doing a live.
I know. I saw that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's not popping up. Showing the video.
Let me see. View on Facebook.
We're having some struggles this afternoon. Oh well. Go to YouTube. Go to Stephanie's YouTube channel and it'll show up for her. Oh. All right. Well, we left off last week. We had just mentioned like a little nugget that we discovered in chapter 12. I don't know. Do you want to talk about Abel and Zechariah real quick? I don't mind covering that. It's just backing it up a few verses. At the end of chapter 11, Luke chapter 11, roughly verse 51, if you want to look at that, Yeshua is talking and he makes this comment and it just says, from the blood of Abel up to the blood of Zechariah, he who was killed between the temple and the altar. Yes, I say to you, you will be removed from this tribe. Woe to you, scribes, because you've taken away the keys of knowledge. And he just got done rebuking the scribes, saying, like, yeah, you're spending so much time studying, and you're adding to the law just as bad as the Pharisees are, and you're not hospitable in teaching them. And so we were curious about that, and the footnote that he's referencing, because he's got half a page of footnotes for every half a page of scripture.
Yeah.
And he's telling us that the very first murder victim in the Bible was Abel, so the blood of Abel. And then when the way the original Bible and Tanakh was ordered, I want to say it was Second Chronicles was actually the last of it. We've since put in Malachi and other books of the Bible have been added, but up to that point, it was ordered a little differently, so that the last person murdered was a person named Zechariah. And so he's just referencing historically and scripturally what they would have been aware of, that they would have understood that. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting, because we don't think about that. We don't think, we've got our Bible today and people are like, King James, that's the only Bible, and this is the Bible, the way it is, and people may not even know that it's not in chronological order. It's not even in the order that it was written, either testaments. We've got the Torah portion, and we've got the writings that are added, but things have been changed and switched. And I know one thing I'm aware of is once upon a time there was the book of Ruth. Proverbs, and then the book of Ruth. Could be vice versa. It might have been Proverbs. But the reason I know that is because the Proverbs is a writing that very much parallels and correlates to Ruth, the book of Ruth. And so they would have been tied together. So things have been changed over history. They've been rearranged.
Yeah, I heard something interesting today. It was basically a pastor who was King James only, but he was talking about, he goes, we use the Bible to test the Greek and to challenge the Greek. And he goes, we don't care about the Greek. We don't care. We care about the English. We care because apparently they, and I remember years ago, my kids were with some other friends, and my son, when he was little, he's like, let's get our Bibles out and have a Bible study, because us women were having a Bible study. Right. So they were together playing and having their own Bible study. And the little boy, the two brothers, looked at my kids and said, oh, we can't read those Bibles. They're not King James. And of course, Matthew just looks at him like, what? I don't understand. And so they ended up coming over our house to explain to us why. And so it was just one of those situations where nobody won any conversation. It was just we agreed to disagree, because I wasn't buying what they were selling and they weren't buying what I was selling.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was, but then when I heard this man today on this video, and he was basically saying, as if the Bible were written in English from the beginning, that, it doesn't matter what the Greek says, we can change the Greek to match the English. And it's like, no, it's actually written in Aramaic and Hebrew, and Greek later, and even with the Septuagint. But, we have all these different languages that the Bible's been written in before it was ever written in English. So, we have to be like aware of that. And that's why we were so anxious to use this for our show, because he has found different manuscripts written in Aramaic, and that was the language that Jesus and his disciples and Paul all spoke.
Right.
So, when they conversed, when he talked like this, all the red letters in your Bible, he's in Aramaic. So
right.
So I think we just have to, just have an open mind about, and I mean, I don't know. Let's not argue about stupid things like that.
Right. I know. I was talking to a friend Sunday, and I said, it's not that it's wrong, right? It's not, I'm not like, there's not been some big gotcha and, oh, they've translated that so far. It's not that. It's just that we understand words and experience words very differently than previous generations 100 years ago. I mean, as an English teacher in high school, I'll say a word and the kids have a completely different understanding of it than the true literary meaning of it. And I have to explain, no, this is what that word really, really means. And it's been misused and changed. And, so.
Well, and look at the word gay. I mean, what did it mean?
Yeah.
And what do we use it for today?
Right. Exactly. And
growing up, I knew, when my husband and I first married, we knew a woman whose name was Gay, and she was, that was her name. It meant happy. It was a feeling, that you had, not
a label.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we should get back.
Yeah. we ended last week. I went and looked it up, but we ended talking about fasting and Isaiah 58.
Okay.
Where he talks about this is what a fast is, because we were talking about the giving of charity.
Yes.
And that was what a true fast is. Go back to Isaiah 58 and look. And so that's where I was just kind of checking while the introduction was running, where we had actually finished up, but we were talking about charity and all of that. And then we just touched on the shamash. And so
we did. Okay. So what we're talking about, we're jumping right into Luke 12 a little bit more. Luke 12 is almost entirely red. So these are all words of Yeshua, and he is doing various teachings. He's talking about, how Elohim even knows the hairs on your head. And if you confess me before men, God will confess you before the messengers of Elohim. Your name, man, you will be confessed. Whoever denies me, I will deny you. And he goes into, he's got a variety of teachings. So I don't want to skip through it, but I'm kind of skipping through it.
And Luke is one that actually has the most, in my opinion, it has the most parables in it.
Well, I think our author even made a note that it is the most Jewish book.
Yeah.
Of all the Gospels, it's got the most references to temple worship and very, very Jewish. And it's because he spent 15 years with Paul, and his father was the governor of Syria. So he was in Israel often with the Jewish people. And so it would make sense that there would be a lot of Jewish parables. He would have been familiar with that. So, yeah. But we get down to almost towards the end of it. He's talking about, he talks about the man who builds his barns, and he wants to tear his barns down and build bigger barns. And he kind of gets rebuked saying, and this is kind of important to the point we're going to make. He's kind of he's rebuking the man saying, your soul is going to be, and accounted for, and all you're worried about are your worldly possessions. And then there's another story about, what do you store up, and the moth is only going to eat it. If you're going to be a master at the time that he returns to the wedding feast, and he knocks and he immediately opens the door to him, blessed are the servants. I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit because it leads up to the point. So it says, blessed are the servants who, when their master comes and finds them awake, truly I say to you, you'll dress himself up and cause them to recline, and the servants will be blessed. But realize this, if the master of the house is known to watch, let's see, I've lost my thing. Master of the house is known watch the thief would come, then he would watch and not allow the house to be broken into. Okay, I know I skipped a lot of that, but here's the point we're trying to get to. Simon Peter then says, Master, who do you speak this parable to? Is it to us or is it to everyone? And Yeshua said, who indeed is the faithful and wise steward, whom his master will appoint over his service, that he should give a portion in due time. So it's a question. Blessed is the servant who, when his master comes, will find that he does do accordingly. Okay, the footnote on this is what we got excited about.
Yeah.
The little phrase, over his service, and he uses a very specific word. He uses the word shamash. And if you guys are in any kind of messianic understanding, you know that the servant candle in the middle of the menorah is called the shamash. And it's literally, so think of that on the menorah, but also in the context of this. This is the one who is appointed, he's literally appointed to achieve the master's goals. So the shamash, I mean, I almost think of like Joseph, right? The servant who was the right-hand man to appoint to Pharaoh or to anyone else, but being known as the light of the world is called the shamash. He is the servant to accomplish the Father's goals. So for Peter to ask him that, Jesus is answering by saying, it's for everybody. It's for everybody because I am here for everyone to hear this so that I can achieve the master's goal or to the Father's goal. So,
and I think the whole, like these chapters, as we go through some of these chapters, you'll see this same kind of message about serving is throughout some of these parables.
Right.
And I think it's important because when we come to the Lord and we are his servant, and it doesn't mean just watching everybody else do everything.
Right.
It's not coming and being a seat warmer in church. It's actually serving people and serving him ultimately by serving others and helping others.
Yeah.
And that's what we're supposed to do. And that's why we went to, Isaiah 58 last week. And it's because he's talking about giving charity, helping people. And we talked about that for a while. But that is, that's like the opposite of our proud lives, our proud attitudes, and our arrogance. Serving others is the complete opposite. It's putting others first. And that's what we're supposed to do. But it's really hard to do sometimes because we're wrapped up in a culture that's all about me.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think it too could be important to, so there's so many people that, we used to call them C&E Christians, Christian,
Christmas and Easter.
Christian, or you just show up and just walk in and walk out and you're not involved, you're not serving, you're not, ministering to others, you're not sharing, you're not opening your house, you're not involved in any kind of hospitality and any of that. And so, would you be worthy of being a servant that's appointed over his service? Right? It's not just, you're not just showing up, right? You're not just saying, I'm here, check me off. But when you look at your life and when you look at your relationship with him, are you a person that he would say, I need you to be, appoint you over my service. I need, it's hard. It's hard to think about that.
Yeah. Cause there's a couple and, I'm not gonna name names or give much information because I don't want to give anything I shouldn't, but I know a couple of ladies who are really hungering and thirsting for understanding the Bible. And we've been talking, I've had dinner with them and just different things like that. And I was talking about my own mentors because we talked about that, I think, last week too, about mentoring others. And sometimes that can offend people. Like, I remember I said it one time And I was like, well, I consider so-and-so, I consider myself a mentor to her. And she was a bit offended. And she's like, you think I need mentoring? And it's like, oh, okay. I guess not.
Always.
And sorry, I was
need mentoring. We always need mentoring.
I thought that too.
Anybody, any age.
But when I was in my early 20s, Lord put a wonderful woman in my life who mentored me, who taught me scripture, taught me how to pray. And then I'm still friends with her today, and then I moved away when I married, and the Lord put another woman in my life that mentored me. And then it was after both those women, a couple of years after that, the Lord said, you're done being the one who is mentored, you will mentor.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I don't know, Lord, I don't know if I'm ready. And he was like, yes, you're going to do it. So I think that, but getting back to the current story is that there was I just sat these women down and I basically said, are you willing to go all out for the Lord? Are you willing to just do whatever it takes to grow closer to him, to know him better, to know his word? I said, because that's what it's going to take. And they just looked at me and they're like, yes, we are. And when I got home that night, they texted me and they said, will you mentor us? And I was, and at first I was like, oh, this is going to be a lot of work. But I knew I had time. I knew the Lord was like, this is more important than anything else you do. And so I said, of course I will, and they were so excited. They were just so excited. And I picked out a Bible study. It's a really basic Bible study. If anybody's in, I'll just show real fast, but it's called The Disciples' Cross. It's from 1996, but I went through this. And it is just Avery T. Willis Jr. It's from Master Life. It's from Lifeway. But it just there's 4 books, and it teaches you everything from faith to prayer to everything walking the Christian life and what it looks like. And sometimes that's where we just need to go back and start, to the basics. And so I'm looking forward to it, but I think that, think about it. Who are you discipling?
Right.
Who are you mentoring? And hopefully your own children, if you have them, but we should all be mentoring and discipling others, because that's the great commandment. That's the great commission. Go and make disciples.
Right.
So one day these ladies are going to be discipling somebody else, I hope.
I think that's good. Yeah. The evangelical gets on that great commission aspect, thinking it's get out and save people. And I'm not knocking that. It's important too, but it specifically says go make disciples.
Yeah.
So you are to invest in, if you have the pleasure of introducing someone to the Lord, to Yeshua, then great. Yes. Thank God. And there's a celebration. However, now the real work begins, because you are to disciple that person and train them up so that they can, and what a lot of people don't realize is rabbis, their disciples were to mimic and look just like them. So it just rotated, on and on. So if I am to look like Christ, if I'm to have the image of Christ and look like Christ, I'm to encourage that in my disciple, whomever I disciple, and they're to do that in their disciples. So
and that's what I did when Marilyn was discipling me. I prayed like she prayed. If she would tell me, oh, this is, I got down on my knees and I prayed, and then I would just do the same thing. All I did was kind of parrot what she said but the Lord would still answer my prayer. Even though I'm like, Lord, I'm just gonna say what Marilyn said, and I'm gonna pray that way too.
That's all I know.
And then answer it, because He was teaching me to be confident in praying and teaching me to pray myself. And as she was teaching me, He was teaching me too. But so and I think that's what we see through here. He's teaching His disciples.
Yeah.
He's using parables to teach his disciples, but all these parables have a reason and an underlying meaning too.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's finding the parallels in the parables,
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's what even today I was asking my husband, like I was reading from, I think, chapter 14 or 15. And I'm like, what do you think these mean? And so we were discussing them.
Well, I'm gonna use that as a segue into the next section, because I like the footnote that he was talking about with the fruit and everything. So I want to talk about that, because
in 13,
I can guarantee it's never used as a teaching point in any kind of I've never heard it as a teaching point, honestly. So if you look at chapter 13, he's continuing on. The first few things that he's discussing, though, it's talking about the Galileans, and there was a tower, an 18
current events.
Yeah, current events. A tower had fell upon these people. They were killed. 18 people were killed, and they're just kind of rehashing some current events. It happens, but honestly, those are important too, even in the Word, because it's a historical moment that can be validated, and you can pinpoint a time, and you've got an exact time and place. So it's important. But then over on about 13 chapter 13 verse 5, he says, no, but unless you repent, you'll be like them. Okay. Then he spoke this parable. So he's setting up a parable. A man had a fig tree that was planted in a vineyard, and he came seeking fruit on it, but he didn't find any. So he said to the worker, behold, 3 years I've come seeking the fruit on this fig tree, and I haven't found any. Cut it down. Why should the ground be wasted? But the worker, hang on, said to him, Master, allow it even until this year, give it 1 more year, until I work with it, and I'll fertilize it, and then maybe it will produce fruit. And if not, next year you may cut it down.
The 5th year.
So, yeah, the 5th year. So what does that mean? Like, have you ever stopped to pause? Has anybody ever read that and just went, gee, I wonder what that means? And you went down.
Like, why is that important?
Yeah, why is that important? What's the fig tree? That's usually a parable that isn't discussed. I swear, I've never heard that discussed anywhere. Like, some people will guess who the fig tree is. You hear a lot about that, but it skipped over. Well, there's a really good footnote in there. We love his footnotes. He says this is a parable that's actually about Torah observance. Okay, hang on. We're going to burn the church is going to get blown up here. It's about Torah observance, not the nullification of Torah. The reason is in Leviticus 19:23 through 25. So you've got to go back. You got to go back to understand when he says these things, when Yeshua is talking these things, his listeners know the Torah inside out, upside down, and backwards. Any kind of reference is a direct hyperlink. They would have picked up on it quickly.
Right.
We don't because we don't know it as well as they do.
Right.
We get too bogged down. Okay, so in Leviticus, it says that if any fruit that's planted in a new land, it needs to be avoided for 3 years. It is not to be eaten. And then in the 4th year, the fruit is lifted up and it's dedicated as a sacrifice of thanksgiving unto Father Yah. Only in the following year, you can have the new fruit. It can be enjoyed, or you could throw it away. By the 5th year, it doesn't matter. 3 years, you're not supposed to eat it. The 4th year is a dedication and a sacrifice. The 5th year is yours to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So he's basically saying that the servant is teaching the master in this case, because it's the servant that's referring to Torah. And but even the servant recognized that it would be an evil act to cut down and destroy this tree. And so he asked his master, be patient, because in the 4th year we can offer the fruit to Elohim. But notice that the servant is careful to state directly, and he doesn't suggest that he cuts it down. He just says it's fine to do whatever you want, because the fruit had already been dedicated by that point. So I thought, what a great footnote. I learned something because I never knew that. I thought that was
and if you read this without knowing the backstory of what that meant 3 years, why that's important, you wouldn't understand it.
Yeah. Just the importance of Torah observance. So they're still, oh my goodness, they're still reading Torah. They're still observing it. They're still following Levitical law at this point. They're still, it's still important. It's still necessary. And we missed a lot of that. Okay. So then they continue on. There's a lot more. He heals someone. Yeshua then is healing someone who was bent over. She was all bent over, and he heals her and she straightens up, if I believe it. And then, of course, the Pharisees are rebuking him because it happened on a Sabbath.
I like what he says. So this woman, did I get ahead of you, or are you?
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah. So and I like his retort, I guess, to them, because they kind of go back and forth in conversation. But he just says that she's a daughter of Abraham, and in the Aramaic, it's devouring accuser, has bound her for 18 years.
Right.
And is it not right to free her from this bondage on the day of the Shabbat?
Well, he had just made the point, if your donkey or ox fell in the ditch, you would go save it.
Yeah.
Well, isn't she, as the daughter of Elohim, even more important?
Right. We had, a sick lamb this week. And
did you? Everybody's sick at your house this week.
Yeah. And it's not easy taking care of a sick lamb.
Yeah, when you're sick.
So, we had realized on Saturday, actually Shabbat, that she was not doing well. She had gone off food and water. So we realized after we put her by herself that she wasn't eating very well. So it ended up that, we did have to. I guess it goes along with this. Even though it was Shabbat, we needed to do something for her. We had to help her, and but it took us a while to figure out what was wrong, actually. Right. So it took us a while until Monday to really know what was wrong with her. But she's back to her old self again now. She's doing just fine. But she had polioencephalitis. So, her brain started to swell, and it looked like she was having a stroke. So, but it's just all a vitamin B deficiency.
Really?
She didn't have enough vitamin B. So I have an injectable vitamin B, started shooting her up with it. And by the 5th dose of it, she was just fine.
Gosh.
But they had to take care of their animals.
You have to take, and Torah allowed it. You're allowed to feed your animals, and you're allowed to care for your animals. That was not.
Fell in a ditch.
Everyone says no work. No work on Saturday. Yes, but you still are required to take care of your animals. And that's very much allowable. So that was the point.
Yeah, because it's like, and just like the woman, he's basically making that argument. She was bound up. It was like she was in bondage. Why would I not free her?
Right.
So, so it's a good point. It's a good analogy that he made that they would have understood, because again, we're talking to Torah understanding people.
Exactly.
He is, not us.
He is. Yeah. Okay. We're up to about 13, 17, roughly, about in that area, if you guys are following along. He does continue on a little bit more. This is where he says the kingdom of Elohim is likened to a mustard seed, and mustard seed which the man takes and casts it into his garden, and it grows into a large tree.
This is what I was reading to Mike today. Because we were discussing what it means, because in both cases, the grain of mustard seed, right? And then it grows, and because I think he says kingdom of Elohim, kingdom of God, or we can say kingdom of heaven. They're all interchangeable.
It's all right.
But it's what do we think of when we think of the kingdom of God? It's not we're not talking about specifically salvation, right? I mean, it's not that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about past the salvation. You're part of the kingdom.
Right.
And I think it goes back to, again, I don't know. I'm going to ask you. So do you take these two signs, the grain of the mustard seed and then the leaven?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of felt like you could take it personally about yourself, or you could also take it as building up the body, because each time you start with something very little,
mm-hmm.
and it grows into something big. So you're starting with a seed that grows into a tree. You're starting with a little leaven that goes into 3 measures of flour.
All of it is leavened.
Yeah.
Everything.
And then the whole, all of it is leavened.
I tend to take it as the end result the large end result.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But do you look at it as that little seed in me growing?
Oh, that's a good point. See, I didn't think of that at all. I went straight to my task to grow, to help grow. Yeah.
To help grow the kingdom of God.
But I love that point that you're making, because so many, faith starts so small, mm-hmm. and trust and understanding and knowledge, mm-hmm. and so many people just, I don't know enough. I could never. I will never. I am not. We talk ourselves into thinking how small we are, mm-hmm. but you got to start somewhere, right? I mean, everything is small. Everything is small until it's planted and grows and nurtured and watered. And I love that point that you made. When I read that, I immediately went to, invest in the kingdom and grow the kingdom.
And I think that is true.
Yeah.
Definitely. That is part of it.
I like the point you made. Yeah.
Because I think it started out as a grain of mustard. It started out as something small. It was rarely. It was Jesus and his 12 disciples, Right. And so then as they met people, they were growing the kingdom.
They were.
He came to grow the kingdom.
Let's keep the idea of the kingdom. Do you want to turn over to Matthew 8:11? Because the next section is.
But what about the? I have highlighted the strive to enter the narrow door.
Oh, okay. Let's go there. Yeah, we'll back up a little bit, go a little slower.
Yeah, well, I know that there's just a lot here. So the strive to enter through the narrow door, and I'm not going to read this just because of my voice, but so this is verse 24, Luke 13, verse 24, and it talks about. There's some key verses in here. I say to you that I do not know you or know where you're from. So you have these people knocking. Master, open the door to us.
Mm-hmm. Here, I'll read it. Okay. For I say to you, many will seek to enter and will not be able to. From the hour that the master of the house rises and secures the door, they will stand outside and knock on the door and begin to say, our master, open up. And he will answer, and he will say, I say to you, I do not know you or where you are from. And then they will begin to say, before we eat and drink and in our streets, you had taught us. Lord, it should sound familiar. I hope it's beginning to sound familiar. But he will say to you, I do not know where you're from. Depart from me, you workers of iniquity. And there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth when you see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and all the prophets in the kingdom of Elohim. But you will be cast outside, and then they will come from the east and from the west and from the south and from the north, and they will recline. Our English Bible says at the table, but this says at the feast. And that's going to be really important in a minute.
If I can get anything else.
Yeah, we're going to stop at verse 29.
Yeah, so the first several verses there up to like 27, 28 goes along with Matthew 7. So if you have your Bibles open, turn back to Matthew 7, and it's sorry, I can feel it coming on, starting in 21. And he says here, my master. So he says, not everyone who says, my master, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but whoever does the will of my Father.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So then it goes on, and he uses some of the same language here. Now, this could be that they both heard it and they both wrote it down, you know. But there's that parallel between the verses, and understanding that just because we call on him, just because we call him our master, just because we are kind of even doing good works, because in Matthew he even goes farther, and he says,
casting out demons in your name.
Yeah, we do this stuff, and in Matthew 7:13, enter by the straight door, for wide is the door and broad is the road that leads to destruction.
Right.
And we look at that and we think it's about the Christian world and the world, you know, the Christian, the church, and the world, but it's really not. I look at it as all believers. There are some who are going to stay on that narrow road, and they're going to do the hard stuff and deny themselves, and maybe even keep the Torah and keep the other things that the Lord talks about in obedience. And then there's those who want to do the easy way. Like, I'll just show up, sit down, listen to a few sermons, sing a few songs, and I'm good for the week.
Right.
And, you know, we have to understand the narrow door is for all people that really are serious. Don't assume that you've already gone through the narrow door. Don't assume that. You know?
Okay, I want to go with that, because at the end of it, it talks about when you see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob reclining at the feast. So Stephanie was sharing with me that is a Hebrew idiom. It's not one, I wasn't familiar with that one. But anytime you see the patriarchs like that, or they're also called the early shepherds, and a reference to a feast, then it is it's a prophecy or a reference to the messianic millennial kingdom. So we've said this before. Everybody talks about the millennial kingdom. Every church is looking forward to the millennial kingdom. Jesus was going to return, and we're going to have the millennial kingdom. What they forget and fail to realize is it's going to look very Jewish, because he's a Jewish king. He's a Jewish servant. And so whenever references to the feast and reclining at the table in the early patriarchs, they're in the millennial kingdom.
Yeah. And again, go back to Matthew 8.
Yeah.
And it starts in 11. And this is where he's talking about, again, he's bringing up the weeping and the gnashing of teeth. And he says, many will come from the east and the west and recline at the table. This is in Matthew. With Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness. So we're talking about sons of the kingdom, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And I don't know, I think I know that you know this, but I don't know that everybody else knows this, but this gnashing of teeth is anger.
It is. Yeah, we've talked about that before. Everybody, when you read that, you think it's gnashing of teeth like you're in pain or something.
Agony.
But the word actually references just an obstinance that you have, and you're
downright
grinding your teeth out of anger, not out of pain. Not out of pain and, oh, I'm so sorry, and I'm gnashing my teeth out of pain. It's anger and rebellion. And so it's a very different idea. Yeah.
So there's anger here, and there's, but yeah, like you said already. I mean, it's an idiom, and that's hard. It was hard for Greeks to translate because they didn't understand the Hebrew idiom.
Yeah.
And it's hard for us to know when it's a Hebrew idiom, so it's not part of our vocabulary to think some of these ways. But but interesting. That's a little tidbit there that I was really excited when I came upon while I was reading it. So there's a lot of good stuff in here that goes back to Matthew 7 and 8. So
so he kind of leaves it off right in there. He does talk about Jerusalem, and blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So he just talks a little bit about Jerusalem being desolate, the destruction of Jerusalem. the prophets that had been killed in Jerusalem. So we get to Luke 14. We might actually get a few done. We've got about 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
He gets into Luke 14. I'm going to turn the page so I can look at my notes. I don't have a lot in 14. I don't know if you have a lot highlighted, but this is where you get the reference where if you need to hate your father, you need to hate your family.
Yeah. And before that, I think it's good if we back up a little bit and go to 11.
Okay.
For anyone who exalts himself.
Mm-hmm. For anyone who exalts himself, Naphash, will be humbled, and anyone who humbles himself, Naphash, will be exalted. And that word Naphash that was inserted that I was saying, it's the Hebrew word referencing a person's soul.
The person and his soul. And that's like, wow, because I think that's really interesting too. Because it's about our souls. Because, if we think about living according to the spirit or to the flesh is our souls. It's what makes us happy. And so really they're saying whoever exalts his own soul will be humbled.
Yeah.
And I probably told this story, but I had a student when I was teaching chemistry, and they were kind of making fun of the kids who didn't get it. And I remember just going, did I tell this story? Do you remember?
No, I don't think so. I don't know if you did.
So it was a Christian school, so I could do this, but I went to him and I just said, after class, I said, you're a smart kid. And I said, and I'm glad that this comes easy for you. I said, but if you don't learn to be a little humble and you want to act out of arrogance and know it all, I said, one day the Lord will humble you if you don't humble yourself. And that's not going to be fun. And he kind of just looked at me and he's like, okay, and I don't know how serious he took me or anything, but I think we have to realize that arrogance is a big problem with human beings. And we're all guilty of being arrogant. And we have to remember that the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he will discipline us when we're arrogant.
Right.
And, and I was talking to somebody today who's going through a really hard time physically. And I said, sometimes what we have to do when we're going through a hard time is ask the Lord, is this spiritual warfare? Or are you doing this to get me closer to you so I'm more dependent on you? Or is this discipline? Because we need to think about it, and there's often times that we need to think, is this a physical issue or is this a spiritual issue? Because spiritual issues can show physically. And so there are questions that we need to learn to start asking ourselves, and knowing that we can be disciplined. And sometimes he does discipline us as his children. If you call yourself a believer in Messiah and you believe he's your father, you will be disciplined when you are acting out in arrogance and without compassion for people and those kinds of things. So it says right here, Jesus himself, that if you exalt yourself, you will be humbled. But if you humble yourself, he will exalt you.
That's nice. So, okay.
My little sermon for the day.
That's okay. You're doing great. Take a sip of water. You've been talking a lot.
This is like I put more cough drops in.
Okay, so he continues on, and it's the parable, I guess, if you want to talk about that. And again, it says, blessed is he who will eat bread in the kingdom of Elohim. And then, okay, this is like 14 verse 15-ish. A certain man had a great supper, and he's asking everyone to come, but everyone has excused themselves one by one. I've bought a field. I need to go take care of it. I've bought a yoke of oxen. I need to go train them. I've taken a wife. And the servant comes and he says, nobody's coming. And the master was angry. And then he says, go out and quickly invite everyone. go out into the streets and among the hedges and urge them to come and taste my supper. And he, as he was going, a large crowd came and turned with him. He who comes to me and does not hate his father and his mother and his brother and his sister and his wife and his children, even himself, is not able to be my disciple. So that's like the last statement he says after this whole parable about the great feast. And he who does not take up his crucifixion stake and come after me is not able to be my disciple. Right. For who among you who desires to build a tower does not first sit down and think about its cost and compare it? Okay, we like that because I enjoyed that part because the footnote, everybody, I understand what he's saying here, but the footnote was so clear. Your life, and it kind of just follows along with the idea of being first or being last, being being at the feast and the narrow table or the narrow or the broad, and it kind of just all tends to go together. But what the point is your love for Elohim should be first and above all else. It's not that you hate, although the word hate is used in the Aramaic. It's that your relationships with anyone other than Elohim should be so secondary. It kind of looks like
less. It's love them less than him.
Right. It pales in comparison to how you should be serving Elohim. So I thought that was
it's a good point because he doesn't want us to hate anybody.
No,
but he does want us to love them less than him, because we can make an idol out of our spouse. We can make an idol out of our children, our grandchildren, our pets. They become most important to us. And we put Jesus on the back burner, and that's not what God wants. We're always to put him first. You hear, like, I've heard soldiers say, God and country, and that kind of thing. And even some of them know God's first, then my country. And I think it's just really important that we never put anything over Yeshua, but it says here, and he says who does not take up their cross, I'll let her talk about this, and comes after me is not able to be a disciple to me.
Right.
That's important language there. And because what it requires a cost.
Right.
I mean, think about your own life, and I'm talking to whoever's listening. What has a relationship with Yeshua cost you? Because if it hasn't cost you anything and nothing in your life has changed, then how good of a disciple are you?
Yeah. And he's talking about taking up your crucifixion. It actually says crucifixion stake. We talked a little bit about this before we came on air. We've got about 3 minutes here. But it wasn't the crosses that we think of that they were crucified on. They were generally a stake in the ground. And then, the cross, either the beam or the X, if you want to think of it even prior to that. And Stephanie was kind of referring to something that she had learned, that they would actually take trees growing in the ground and they would strip things away up to a certain point. And you would have to carry your crossbeam, because then they would hook it into the tree and you would be
notch it.
Yeah, they would notch it in to the between the branches. And then, you would be crucified there and not high. We always think of high and lifted up and it, up high in the air. But, if you know of a tree, the trees are the first tree branch is pretty low. When you were a kid, you'd pull yourself up and climb the tree. So that, you were responsible for bringing that in. And then think too of even Yeshua carrying his cross, so he's referencing his crucifixion, but he's also referencing, the cost of it and the blood, sweat, and tears that go into that. And, is it going to be a disastrous ending? Are you ultimately going to die, or is that something that is worthy of the sacrifice sacrifice that you're making. So,
and this language kind of reminds me of when we were studying Esther and the Haman. Haman was on the gallows. It wasn't a gallows.
Yeah.
It was a stake.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
it was a stake. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. That made me think of that. Mm-hmm. And how much we get wrong, even thinking gallows are something to hang you on, but they're not. They were, the language was a stake.
Right.
So, but yeah, so this is, I think this is one of the first verses I really learned. And actually it's, it goes back to this book. It was like, it actually mentions this verse about picking up your cross and following him. And that's like a burden. It's a burden you're carrying. Yeah. And it was a sign of persecution. Yeah. And we don't know persecution in this country that much. I mean, I think we're kind of starting to see it.
You know, you said the word discipline, and I know a lot of people kind of cringe at that and like, oh, I don't want that. I don't want that. But I've always kind of looked at it more as refinement, you know.
Absolutely.
And we've talked about, I mean, I know you've heard this at church. You've heard this before. You know, there's got to be a fire lit to burn away. You know, if you have pure gold and pure silver, it's liquefied and the impurities, you know, come to the surface. I know people have heard this example before. And so, you know, or a diamond, you know, a diamond is crushed and pressed before it becomes beautiful. And so, you know, when you hear the word discipline, often that's a negative thing, like, oh, I don't want that. But think of it instead maybe as a refining and taking away and chipping away. And, you know, we are called to serve. We are called to, you know, submit and be used. And oftentimes there's something needed to be done that we may need to be molded a little bit more before we're completely usable. So,
and I heard a pastor, I mean, this is in Hebrews like 12, I think, about discipline, and the Lord disciplines those he loves. So he is talking about us. I mean, if you belong to him, he's talking about disciplining you, and he disciplines those he loves. And I remember the pastor I had done all this research on discipline and what it means and where it goes back to the Hebrew and everything, and because it's also, he was actually kind of quoting the Psalms. So the original verse he's quoting in Hebrews goes back to Psalms. So I was looking up the Hebrew words for it, and it actually, one of the definitions is punishment. But when I remember the pastor where we were going at that time actually said, no, it's more like training. It's training. And I felt like he downplayed the word for the sake of people hearing. But it is about refining, because if it doesn't change you, it doesn't do any good.
And I know we're almost out of time here, but even an athlete disciplines his body, right? Trains his body, and it hurts. I have spent lots of time at Orange Theory. It hurts. So you have to have that muscle memory in all way, shape, or form. So we made it, Stephanie. I think we need to exit out. So thank you, folks, for joining us. Have a blessed Shabbat. Get some rest, Stephanie. Feel better. Thanks for joining us.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. If you missed today's show and want to watch it again, or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you will find this show and all of the other live Lamb show archives on the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the lambnetwork.tv website. I'm Stephanie Pavlantos, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.